Hey, Execore members, welcome back to our podcast. I know it's been a while, but we were just with life and everyone's busy schedules right now. We're finally coming to bookend our podcast series on leadership journeys. I know we've heard a lot of really good stories from our members, from Julie, from Amanda, a lot of the different people we've had on, and we're really looking forward to the guest that we have on today. Someone that I know from the Kansas City area where I'm from, met at an event and had a really good conversation on leadership, and I was super excited. I'm really excited for this conversation. So, we've got Janet Breitenbach, who's a partner and executive coach at Novus. And like I said, we met at a happy hour and probably spent most of our time nerding out about leadership. And I was like, oh my God, you have to be a guest on our podcast. So, super excited to have you
Yes.
here, Janet.
Thank you. Yeah, I love nerding out on all things leadership. So I'm glad to be here.
And so, really quick before we get jump into the podcast, do you kind of want to talk a little bit about your background, what brought you into executive coaching, and a little bit about Novus before we kind of jump in, so our members know a little bit
Yeah,
more.
sure. So yeah, the firm, it's called Novus Global. We're an executive coaching firm. We have about 40 plus coaches all over the U.S. and Canada. We're a virtual company. 60 plus total members, including back office operations, executive team, and we've grown pretty rapidly in the last 8 years since I started. So I had the pleasure and honor of being able to start when there were only five of us and maybe one back office, and there were no best practices. There was no structure. It was just five coaches learning on the go on how to go further faster together, because executive coaching tends to be a solopreneur
Hmm.
game.
Yeah.
And we all five of us just were aligned. So Jason Jaggard, who's the founder and CEO of Novus Global, he just had this crazy idea that, hey, I think we can go further faster, and he certainly didn't need us, right? It was a risk because it meant actually sharing your network and the people that you're working with and your clients, and those things can get messy. That's how business partnerships go sideways, and people have resentment,
Hmm.
or people feel taken advantage of. So it was a huge risk, but we have navigated the ups and downs of building a place and a culture where we get to practice what we preach, and treat our culture the way that we like to hold space for our clients as well, to build healthy, vibrant, exciting cultures.
It's kind of like startup in leadership mode. I think you'll understand some of the pain points that a lot of our members go through in that startup world of like
Oh
moving
yeah.
fast and not having any structured. So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's such a fun place to play if you can have a certain mindset around it, knowing that, hey, there's going to be rapid change.
yeah.
We're constantly going to be changing. All right, we're like, what's the best practice for this? Oh yeah, it's different now. Like, all right, cool. So yeah, it's a fun game to play.
Yep. No, and so we're
That's
excited to have you on this. So I know you and I have talked about it, but I'll kind of remind a little bit of what at Execore, what we're about, and why we exist as an organization. We've
Yeah.
Karan, who was the original founder of Execore, the idea that he had was there's a lot of great, nonprofit organizations for leaders in accounting and leaders in, different spaces. And the area that he saw was there was a vacuum for leaders in like startup space,
Yeah.
right? Where how do we empower these executives that are very driven, and there's a common trait that a lot of leaders in startups have is they're very motivated, driven people,
Yeah.
self intrinsically motivated. And so we wanted to provide a place like where they could get continuous improvement,
Yeah.
have a place where they could lean on other leaders, where they could say, hey, I'm going through this challenge with my team, or I've all of a sudden now inherited this challenge, or I'm having to manage up to my CEO. So we that was the thesis behind this. And then jumping forward to what we've been doing with this podcast is we've been hearing from a lot of our members about their journeys into leadership, right? Because personally, I'm a big believer that no one leadership journey is the same. And, there are people that I would say don't have titles that are leaders. And I'm big on that proponent that leadership's an action, not a title. And so we've heard great things from their journeys, but where I'm really excited to learn from you and get some of your,
Yeah.
expertise as you've, from your experience, talked to executives. I know you've
Yeah.
worked at executives at Netflix and a lot of these large companies, but also, having experience from a startup background of what does leadership mean? And I think we've never truly defined that. And I know it's an always evolving definition, but I'm hoping that we can maybe get to a spot today where you can provide better insight for our listening
Yeah.
members of what does growth mean for a leader, and is it okay to fail? And when you fail, what are things you should be looking for to keep growing and
Yeah.
understanding and being motivated? So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited for where this conversation goes, but do you have any
Yeah.
like
Well, the first, and I actually, I'm bummed that I don't remember where this quote is from, but what you were just saying reminded me of one of my favorite leadership quotes, which is, "Leadership is the art of mastering paradox." Does that, you
yeah,
smile? I wonder if you know that quote or if you know who it is, because I want to properly give it
don't know
credit.
what it is, but you say it and I relate to it, so that's what
Yeah.
makes me smile, right? It's like
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I get like chills, or I get like, oh, I can
Yeah.
feel it. There's like that emotional smile. So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's funny. So leadership is the art of mastering paradox, where where two things can be true at the same time. What's the other line? Oh, there's a question that I think this one, it might be Andy Stanley, who's a big leadership guy, but there's a question that we learned early on, which is this a problem to solve or a tension to manage?
Hmm.
Because oftentimes when things are going wrong or there's gaps or mistakes or balls being dropped, we often ask, oh, this is a problem and we need to fix it, rather than is this a tension to manage. So I think of that as the same, a similar in the similar world, because
Hmm.
mastering paradox is all about tension, which can be uncomfortable for those of us who are high performers who want to get things right. The idea that maybe there is no right, or maybe right has a different definition, can feel very uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of leaders, because there are a lot of tensions to manage when you're a leader.
Yeah.
It's not as black and white as some jobs of the people that you're leading, which is usually, I know what success looks like in my role. And so sometimes it does mean getting creative with, like, how do I define a win? Like, if I'm committed to creating a positive experience for the people I'm leading, how will I know? Like,
Hmm.
how are we going to measure that? So that's why I love talking about leadership, because to me it's such an art. Like, it
Hmm.
is not a science necessarily, and it really requires you to love the game of always being connected to gaps, hard
Hmm.
conversations. It's a big development muscle. I've actually had clients where, like you and I talked about at that event, where they got promoted to be a leader, or they just were an entrepreneur, right? They had like some great idea, they created a startup, and they stumbled into leadership
Yeah.
because now I need to hire people, which means I have to lead. And this frustration of, man, I can't find people to just do the job right, which of course that's a piece of it. And it's been interesting sometimes to be like, hey, this is going to be a journey.
Yeah.
Are you up for that journey? Or are you just like going to strong arm or white knuckle, trying to get people to do things right, rather than seeing the journey as like, oh, this means holding regular conversations with someone, learning how to manage the tension, learning how to develop, learning how to be curious about what's going on with my direct report and why they're dropping balls this week, and maybe there's something wrong, right? We have a phrase, or a line that we say a lot, which is, a broken promise is a cry for help.
Hmm.
And to me, like, having that like curious posture rather than they messed up,
Yeah.
like is just sometimes not our go-to.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting how many people stumble into leadership.
Hmm.
I know later you're going to ask me about books. There's
Yeah.
a book I wanted to mention called The Motive by Patrick, I think, Lencioni,
Hmm.
which is it's a little bit of a parable or allegorical story. And it is about basically someone who crushed it at their job and then became CEO. And now they're trying to win at CEO in the same way that they won as that person. And it's not working. And I love it because it really shows like the why in the road, or the fork in the road, to, did I just want the title? Was it just cool and enticing to be able to call myself CEO, or do I actually want to fall in love with leadership?
And I think you kind of lead into one of the things that we see and I've seen as a challenge, right? Even in my leadership journey, is a lot of times we promote people, especially in the startup space, right? Like you have these, and you kind of alluded to it, and even now you're talking, right? Like, was I after the title? Or we as leaders might promote people from our team to take on leadership roles because they were so good at their role, and we're like, if
Yeah.
they deserve it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's tangible. We see that they deserve something more than what they've gotten. That's the promotion, is now they're a manager or they're a leader or
Yeah.
a director. From your experience, like, and that happens all the time in startups, right?
Yeah.
And they might not be prepared to be in a leader role, or now, like even the example you shared, right? Like they get in this and now they hate what they do because they're no longer that lone wolf. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are
Mm-hmm.
things that you as an executive coach, like what's advice you would give to someone in our community that's like, I just got promoted, I loved what I used to do, and I was such a high performer, and now I'm having to be not that anymore. Now I'm managing other people. Like, what are things that you recommend people do when they get put into that position? Because that happens all too often, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is where you really have to weigh, well, one, connect to your true desire, because oftentimes we, get into the shoulds, like, well, I should want this role. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is the quote unquote better role, right? We get into that mode, and it masks us from actually being sober or honest about what do I really want. And sometimes we see it as binary, like, well, I have to figure it out at this role, even though it's not something I want. It's not natural to me, or the natural to me isn't as important to me. It's more like, am I committed to grow in this, right? Like I've
Yeah.
seen people who have no previous experience leading, but if there's a desire, like, but I really want to get good at this, great. But oftentimes people aren't honest with themselves, and that creates an instability internally. There's a lack of self alignment, and so it's spilling out everywhere. Like I'm getting frustrated. My family feels it. The people I'm leading feel it. The people I'm accountable to feel it, and I'm saying with my words that I want this role, but everything else is telling me I don't. So one is to get sober. Like, do I really want to grow in this? Like, what's the journey worth going on? Because most people think in terms of what do I want, not what's the journey worth going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is no, then it's like, hey, let's see what else. Like, is there another role? Is there another possibility? Because there's payoffs and costs, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we can get really enticed by either the title or the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, ask yourself, so if there's an inkling in you that you might actually be able to stoke the fire of interest in learning to advocate for human beings,
Mm-hmm.
then leadership might be for you, and there are resources out there to help you grow in that, just like any skill. It's just interesting to me, like, in sports, which we have a whole arm of our company. We have the Novus Global sports side, where we both work with athletes and we work with people on the sports corporate side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating to me because when it comes to being world class as an athlete, it's a no-brainer to hire coaches to watch the tapes, learn again, like, what did I do wrong? That's a no-brainer. But when it comes to leadership, we often avoid it, like, oh, I should already know this, I must be broken if I don't know how to lead. And it's like, it's a skill just like anything else that you can learn.
Yeah.
I say that actually also for dating and relationships, which, for people who are getting on being hard on themselves for
Yeah.
for that too. I'm like, look, being good at a relationship is also a skill. There are books, there are resources, there are dating coaches, there are
Yeah.
therapists, there are people out there who can help you.
And what would you? So I agree. I so agree with you, right? Because it's not like, I think there's this. I think people have these great leaders or mentors they've had, and they just assume that they were like, they just were born that way, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
you aspire to be these great leaders, right? Like I've got leaders that I know, or books I've
Yeah.
read, people that I'm like, I aspire to be that kind of leader. And I think it's hard because we put them on such a pedestal because they're so
Mm-hmm.
perfect that it's hard to even imagine that they would make a mistake. And then you, as a your own personal leader, are like, oh, if
Yeah.
I made a mistake, there's no way they would make a mistake like that. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
in that, right, I think there's this underlying that there's always growth that's going to happen, right? And being comfortable
Yes.
with the growth. What would you do? Like, what are some trick, tick, tips or tricks that you would recommend for people to be like, how does someone have that honest conversation with themselves? Because I think that is an
Mm,
underlying thing, especially when you're at startups and things are moving so fast. Is like
yeah.
I think people might be afraid to admit that, oh, like I need a little bit more work here. Or if I admit to my team that
Mm,
I don't know the answer, then now I
yeah.
might not be viewed as this stoic person I need to
Right.
go to. So, like, what are some, when you
Yeah.
see people that come to you in coaching, what's advice you would give to people when they have that kind of issue?
Yeah, well, literally one of the frameworks that we help our clients adopt is learning to love the gap. And it sounds simple, but the idea basically being oftentimes human beings are motivated by either fear or love. And fear is not a bad motivator. A lot of people are motivated by fear, and fear is just, think of that as the bucket for anything under the fear category: shame, disappointment, like failure, anything at all, right? Like I'm gonna do a good job because I want to look good, or if not, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And so, but there's cost to that. There's cost to be letting yourself being driven or motivated by fear alone, because then I'm going to lower my vision usually, because I'm gonna shoot for only what I think I can achieve. I'm usually unwilling to look at my gaps, look at my blind spots. If like I'm working with you, Usman, and like I'm being motivated by fear and looking good, if you were to say, "Hey, Janet, I have some feedback for you," I'm gonna bristle up, because I'm like, no, it's like pushing up against the view I have of myself, right? So I'm limiting myself to grow. So I mean, the advice overall is to learn to fall in love with your gaps, because that's how people really and truly explore what they're
Hmm.
capable of. So the other thing I'll say is like play the long game. So many people don't play the long game. They're playing the right now game. They're asking themselves, how do I feel good now? How do I look good now? How do I be in control now? How do I be right now? Right? Like these are our somatic markers, or the boundaries that protect us, but they also get in the way of us truly going to that next level. So play the long game. Um, I will not coach anyone until we've landed on a vision that's measurable and that's outside their realm of realistic, that would be thrilling. And the reason for that is because it's not about just hitting that objective. It's about how they'll get to transform along the way.
Yeah.
And so if they give me, like 99% of the time when I'm on a first call with someone and I ask them, okay, what's your vision? What would be amazing? Let's say we work together for a year. What would you be achieving? What results would you be seeing on your team, with your company? And they say a bunch of things. They say a bunch of KPIs. They say a bunch of, maybe a promotion, maybe something. And then I'll show them like a circle, and inside the circle represents what feels kind of possible, center really possible, and then outside the circle is impossible. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. We call it the intuitive fence, because we all have some sort of intuitive sense of what's possible or not possible to us, and for why it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And a large percentage of the time when I ask, like, hey, those objectives, that vision that you told me, is that inside the fence or outside the fence? Where do you think most of the time people say?
It's probably inside, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah.
I would say most of the time people will state a vision that they have that's, yeah, this is possible. It's like,
Hmm.
great. I don't care about that. Like, I want us to go after something that you're like, I have no idea how I'll get there. I don't have a map for that yet. Something that's going to require me to reinvent myself, to transform, to grow. And that's the bullseye, because the principle there is that most people are vastly underestimating what they're capable of.
Yeah.
Even the people that we admire, that we're like, whoa, those are crazy dreamers, they're underestimating what they're capable of. And that's just a human thing, because we all have these, boundaries in our brain. They're called somatic markers,
Hmm.
that prevent us because now we're kind of in the uncomfortable zone, and now I don't know how I'm going to get there, or now that might require me to look bad instead of look good. It might
Mhm.
require me to be wrong. It might require me to get feedback I don't want to hear. It might require me to ask for something that I get rejected on, right? Like now we're cooking,
Yeah.
you know. So that's the bullseye.
Yeah. No, I like that because I have a saying that I always tell anyone that joins my team is be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I
Hmm.
think there's this chart where it shows, right, like where growth happens and it's that one little uncomfortable spot. But I just think as humans, we have over time become so used to being in that comfort, right? Like I want to
Yeah.
be on my couch, I want to watch Netflix, I just want to be comfortable. Like don't make me
Hmm.
go outside and
Yep.
network with people I don't know. That just sounds so much more daunting than just watching the next episode of a TV show I
Yeah.
love. And I think like with kind of like with what you're aligning on and what you're saying is it's that idea of and we had a member on on our podcast that made a comment. It was like just get one centering yourself, but knowing that it's going to be uncomfortable, and then just saying, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable. Let's just move on. And
Mm.
I think that's the underlying when I've seen leaders that end up being successful when they transition in their leadership role,
Yeah.
they're okay with that idea of like I might not have all the answers, but then they build what I call like that like what you're kind of saying, but it's like the network of people I can go to. And that's part of the thesis with Execore is like have those resources, right? Whether it's an executive coach or a mentor that you can say, hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this situation. I
Yeah.
had a team member come in and they're crying about personal family stuff. And I've never dealt with like as a leader, realizing that I also have to be that person sometimes. Like
Yeah.
that's very uncomfortable to be that leader where all of a sudden you went from KPI driven to now you also have to make sure your team's okay. And there's more than
Yeah.
just metrics that matter to people, right? They are human.
Yep. Yep.
And so in that, you're kind of aligning with one of my next questions is like, so if leadership is something that is always, it's a constant growth, you always have to be learning and be challenging yourself, you know, how, like, obviously, I think you being on your executive coaches is a really good spot to start. I would say to anyone that hasn't
Mm-hmm.
done an executive coaches, that's a great spot to have someone that can
Sure.
challenge you and help you grow. But what are other things that you would recommend leaders do that they can continue learning throughout their careers to, challenge themselves? Is it doing a quarterly one-on-one with themselves? I know it's very popular to do like the 360 reviews where you get feedback. Like,
Yeah.
what are things that you see in successful leaders that always continue to keep growing?
Yeah. And there's probably 100 things. It's going to be different for everyone. I think the thing that will inspire the actions that will actually help really is having a measurable, thrilling vision that's outside your intuitive fence. And here's why. And I'm just thinking about even this last week. I was talking to a few executives that wasn't wanted coaching, but it really was other people who wanted him to get coached.
Got
And so when asking about like, hey, what would be amazing? A lot of his responses were, everything's great. I'm good. My family's great. Everyone loves me. My company is great. We're good. It's like, great. No problem. Let's celebrate that.
Yeah.
And that's not going to create growth. And a lot of people kind of have this relationship with if I say that I want something, that means I'm not content, or that means I'm not happy, or that means I'm not doing good. And that's the paradox. So speaking of paradox, is like it can be both. It can both be that you're winning, things are awesome, things are moving, and what's next, right? There's two overlapping circles I usually show, which is like celebrate and what's next.
Mhm.
Most high performers actually lean towards asking like what's next, and that they avoid the celebration part.
Guilty. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, that is a quick recipe for burnout, because, that's that feeling of being on a hamster wheel, because every time you finish a deadline or you achieve something, it's like, all right, what's next? And it's like, oh, it's never ending.
Yeah.
And so for people who lean towards asking what's next and maybe avoid the celebration or the self-acknowledgement or taking a beat and, being proud of yourself, I would encourage them to do that, because that's going to give you more fuel. So for you, Usman, even like practically, that will give you more fuel to keep asking what's next,
Yeah.
because it's going to be energy, it's going to be life-giving, all that. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to grow. Obviously, books, there's masterminds, you can hire a coach, you can get a mentor. Feedback is huge. You'd be surprised how often people just avoid getting regular feedback, or the only time they get feedback is like once a quarter.
Hmm.
And I would say you can foster a culture, not only within yourself, but with the people around you, of feedback, where you're just like the gym. We use the metaphor of the gym a lot. If the environment you're creating is like the gym, feedback is like a muscle that you can stretch, and you can go back to regularly. So if I only do sit-ups once a quarter, I'm not going to be very strong, but if I'm practicing giving and receiving feedback, getting better at it, it really is a skill. Even as a coach early on in my career, I was learning from someone I admired, and they were like, feedback is a big part of coaching. So obviously you're asking questions, you're helping them cast vision, but a big part is if I'm seeing something in my client, like my job is to care more about them than anyone else in their life. If they're surrounded by yes men,
Hmm.
for me to say, hey, can I give you some feedback? And that was a muscle that I had to strengthen,
Hmm.
because either I wouldn't see it, I wouldn't know how to word it, I didn't know how to approach it, or I'd hold back, or I'd be passive about it. I try to like get around it without actually saying
Yeah.
it, like, so it just took practice.
Yeah.
The Just to bring it back to the sport analogy again, there's one of our frameworks, which is in our first or second chapter of our book, which is called Beyond
Hmm.
High Performance. Talk a lot about like the three ways most people relate to work: the prisoner mindset, which is I work because I have to,
Hmm.
which, those of us who are entrepreneurs, we usually like, oh, that's not me, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so then there's that. And then there's the mercenary mindset, which is I work because I love it. But that's like work hard, play hard, I'm in, I'm out, and if someone wants to pay me 20% more, I'm out of here. I'm gone,
Yeah.
right? And then there's the missionary mindset, which is I work because I feel called to it, which usually is when people think, oh, that's the better one. Maybe there's pros and cons to all three of
Hmm.
these, but the missionary mindset is very it's only me, I have to do it. And then so even that, if you see it in a little circle, can go back to the prisoner mindset.
Yeah.
Like, how come no one else cares the way that I do? I'm
Yeah.
working extra hours. Why doesn't anyone else point these things out? Why am I the only one responding to
Hmm.
emails as fast as I am? Right? Like, we start to get resentful, and then we get into like I have to
Hmm.
mindset. But the athlete mindset is I work because that's how I grow,
Hmm.
which to me is such a life-giving way of relating to work, no matter where you are, especially when I'm coaching someone who's like, maybe they're not in charge, maybe they're like one or two rungs down, and they're feeling victimized by the fact that, well, my boss doesn't let me do this, the system, it's this, it's that, it's this, that's like, how do you want to relate to work, whether you stay here or not? Like, how do you want to relate to work so that you can grow? So it's like, hey, the athlete mindset is I work because that's how I grow,
Hmm.
or work is practice.
Yes.
And when you think about some of the most, masterful world class athletes, think of Michael Jordan, whoever it is, they have hours and hours and hours behind the scenes before they're on camera. Probably only 5% of what their playtime is actually on camera. The rest of the time they're at the gym at 5 in the morning. They're shooting shot after shot after shot after shot. In leadership, where do we practice?
Yeah.
There's no gym where I could go practice giving feedback. Maybe AI will provide us
Yeah.
with that at some point. But so work is practice, right? When I'm leading a meeting and I'm creating an agenda, that is my practice. And so if you don't fall in love with the gap, you don't
Hmm.
fall in love with balls dropping, things not working, things falling apart, you're not going to grow as quickly as you might. So I just love that analogy, because to me it's like, if work is practice, you will find a million different ways to continue to grow, which
Mhm.
can include giving and receiving feedback regularly, giving feedback regularly, learning the art of my other favorite thing, learning the art of the agreement,
Mhm.
which I don't know if you listened to that podcast I sent you. It's called Expectations versus Agreements,
Mhm.
and that's one of the best skills you can learn, is how to get out of expectation and into clear agreement. And sometimes it's harder than you think. I've had so many people say, "Oh yeah, I create agreements," and they'll tell me a story of a conversation they had with their direct report. I was like, "That's not an agreement."
Mhm.
If you didn't make a request and they didn't respond with yes, it's
Yeah.
not an agreement.
I feel like that's a good, being married. I think that anyone that's got a partner, I think that you always have
Oh
that
yeah.
balance of expectations versus agreements. Like, did we actually agree on it? Did one person just say, and the other
Yes.
one was either nodding their head along and never truly? I think that's a good, personal life where I think where I right. I think we get caught up that leadership is only at work from 9 to 5, and I'm a big believer like leadership is something that you mean I've got a newborn daughter at home and I'm leading her,
Yep.
right? She might not know it. There's leadership in that. There's leadership with my parents. And there's so many other ways. And
Yeah.
like kind of what you were saying, I think for me on like leadership, it's find areas where I always challenge like young leaders is like find areas outside of work, like you said, right? Like because if you
Yeah.
can't just practice at work, then find other go be on a board of a community member, right? Go find
Yes.
other areas where you can learn skills
Yes.
if you are afraid that you don't want to take it into work and fail at work,
Yeah.
then go find
Yeah.
areas outside of work where you can still practice leadership. And I think where we get caught up as leaders when we talk about leadership, and I always have to check myself, is it doesn't have to be like I think we think leadership is like I am in front of 1,000 people and I like now I'm like come on everyone like even a one-on-one thing is leadership, right? And you never know how like there's no direct definition. Like you're talking about this example of feedback. I have a personal story with feedback where in my early days, like I always knew I wanted to be in some form of leadership, and I was that kid in college that thought, oh, I've got leader. I played sports. I was always the captain. Like I was like, I've got
Yeah.
leadership mastered. This is easy
Yeah.
to me. And I was always told, like Uzi, you're just a natural. Like you gravitate
Mm.
towards it. I had a mentor that's very vivid, like a mentor to this day that I hold very highly. Like, and I was studying abroad, and we did a leadership seminar, and he called me out on it. Like I'd never
Mm.
had someone check me as hard as he checked me on leadership, to where I started spiraling. Like I'm like, have I been like just acting like a leader this entire time? And it was this idea of feedback and getting comfortable receiving and giving feedback. And I think would love your feedback on this too. Is like I think a lot of leaders are so used to getting feedback because they were a high performer and they always got this positive feedback
Yeah.
that they never learn how to give what I call feedback for improvement or criticism. And
Yeah.
then they get put in a leadership role, and now they're so afraid to be that person that goes and says, "Hey, Janet, great job at the presentation, but maybe it went a little long. Like, let's talk
Yeah.
about that. Like, maybe you missed the mark, and let's talk."
Yeah.
And one of the things that his name's Dr. Al, he's one of the directors of the Study Abroad Leadership Program, and he said it's a mindset shift that you as someone that's giving feedback need to remember is like your job is to just provide the feedback. It
Mm-hmm.
is the other person's job to receive it, and you can't control that. If you sit there and you like get so afraid that oh I don't like, I'm going to be the bad guy,
Yeah.
the reality of it is in my mind you're willing to take time out of your day because you see that person being better than what they were. And when he told me that, it changed. I don't know if it was like a light bulb moment. I've since that day have been like maybe I give too much feedback now, but it was like I give it because I see you in a better spot. I want to help you grow, and that's why
Yes.
I'm giving feedback. And
Yeah.
yes, in this moment, you're gonna be like, "Damn it, Uzi, you made like I was having a great day, and you pulled me aside, and you just ruined my day." And I'm sitting at my desk going, "Uzi doesn't like me, or Uzi thinks I'm bad
Yeah.
at my job." In reality, it's actually Uzi wants me to be better. He's willing to take time out of his day to be the bad guy to help
Yeah.
me improve. And I think when you look at it in that way, and that's the advice I give young leaders is you're not the bad guy. Oh, yes, you can deliver in the bad way.
Yeah.
That's an art, that's a skill you learn. But I think getting in and that's the whole getting in the uncomfortable zone of like, yes, for a few
Yeah.
minutes, you are going to be perceived as ruining their day. But you can't control that. That's upon the person getting the feedback to say,
Yeah.
what am I now going to do? they can easily take it and say, you could go, Uzi gave me this feedback, great, I'm not going to take it in through one ear, out through the other.
Mm-hmm.
But that's now your directive, and you decide that. I don't get to decide that. But what I do decide is, do I want to take time out of my day to make you better, right? And I think
Yep.
that's an area of leader. When you talk about feedback, I always kind of push people towards. Um,
Yeah. Well, and so feedback is a team sport. So, I mean, we do like full days just on feedback with teams, not just facilitating them actually doing it,
mhm,
but helping them learn how to relate to feedback as the giver, helping to relate to feedback as the receiver, right? Because even there's what we call occurrences or perceptions that we all carry,
mhm,
right? Like you said, someone is going to think it ruins their day. Maybe some people are going to be like, I'm hungry for this, right?
yeah,
But the cool thing is that we can all change and adjust our currents to how what we want to experience.
yeah,
And so one, yeah, like you, Uzi, like you can be responsible for how you give it. The other person can be responsible for how they receive it. And then as a team, you can again, just like everything is a skill that you can
yeah,
learn, you guys can upgrade together in how you're delivering feedback more effectively and how you're receiving it more effectively. And then you got a feedback culture where it just happens on a regular basis.
yeah,
Like now, it's so regular for us now, it happens constantly. I'll send a
mhm,
voice memo, like a 2-minute voice memo to someone. I'll text them really quick and say, hey, I have some feedback related to that thing we talked about. Would you be open to hearing it? Yes, great. I'll send a voice memo. So sometimes it happens more formally,
mhm,
sometimes it happens more casually.
yeah,
But the idea is closing the gap between when you have the feedback and when you actually deliver it. And then that's how teams get more done in less time. It's in some ways the hidden like tactic. When we go in and say, "Hey, we're here to help you get more done in less time with higher satisfaction," people automatically think what we mean is like systems and processes. And
yeah,
it's like, no, we're going to help you be so transparent with each other and learn how to advocate for each other fiercely that there's no longer a month that goes by where you are carrying this feedback
mhm,
and you're not communicating it because you're nervous. How are they going to take it? And for the other person, they're going to close the gap between when they think, I think someone has feedback, go and ask for it. Like,
yeah,
hey, do you have feedback for me? Right. And once you start to close that gap, you'll find that teams can really move quickly.
yeah,
Um, and there are best practices that we teach people on how to give feedback. Like you said, some people will automatically have an occurrence where it's like feedback means I'm bad, I'm wrong,
mhm,
or it's not, I'm not doing things right. Um, we offer people the occurrence or the perception to hold on to feedback is neutral.
mhm,
When you look in the mirror and I have something in my teeth, the mirror is not telling me I'm a bad person.
yeah,
It's just telling me that there's something in my teeth. There's a gap,
yeah,
possibly getting in the way of my vision to not
sure,
have food in my teeth,
yeah,
And so feedback is neutral. Feedback is a gift.
yeah,
And there's one more where you should say feedback is neutral. Like, oh, it's data.
yeah,
Feedback is data. So as the receiver of feedback, I
mhm,
can hold on to that as this is all data.
mhm,
As the giver, I'll give you one of the best practices that we share with our leaders and
yeah,
teams that tends to go missed. So I think it's the second step in our giving feedback steps, which is align the feedback to that person's vision. So if you align the feedback to that person's vision, there's a way higher probability, one, that they'll want it, they'll receive it, they'll apply it, they'll shift, right? But most of the time when we're giving feedback, we're disconnected from their vision or we're more connected to my vision. Like I'm
yeah,
giving Uzi this feedback because I want him to stop doing this because it's annoying me.
yeah,
Rather than, oh, I wonder what Uzi's vision is for how he wants to show up in that meeting. I wonder how he wants to be perceived. I wonder what his vision is for the experience he wants to create for everyone he's leading.
mhm,
Because then if you were to tell me, hey, my vision is for you to feel heard and cared for. And then if I say, hey, Uzi, can I give you feedback? When you interrupted me in the meeting, I didn't feel heard. Then you're more likely to go, oh my God, I want to change that because my vision is for you to feel heard, right?
yeah,
rather than me coming in with something that's a problem or like, how dare you, or, anything like
Hmm.
that, we often forget that. And half of the time we are going through those steps with a team, I'll usually get the question, but what if you don't know their vision? And I go, that's a great question. How could you find out? And almost indefinitely, you see them go, oh, I could ask them. I could ask them what their vision is. And it's just interesting, right? As human beings, we tend to avoid just going to the person and asking them, hey, what's your vision
Yeah.
for this? Because it's uncomfortable. Maybe I should know. Maybe they don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
just ask.
No, I think those are. I mean, a lot of those is what you're talking about, right? I think especially in that startup lens, it becomes very tough because and right or wrong, right? The culture in startups becomes this thing where it's like we have to move fast. We don't have time for this. But I do like what
Yes.
you said, where it was like sometimes it's not processes, and I think startup leaders, they're to a fault, get too focused on processes. Like, oh, we're now growing, so I need to create a policy for this, and we need to have an onboarding and an
Yep.
offboarding.
Yep.
But the reality of it is the underlying tone of companies that are successful is that they create a good culture, right? And that is where I
Mm-hmm.
think good leadership comes from. And I think anyone, there's this idea of servant leadership, and that was actually where I was going to go next, right? When you start talking about like emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
how would you talk about like with because what I've even with what you're talking about with vision, a lot of like the feedback, there's this level of like being centered, self-centered yourself to be able to have those conversations. What are strategies that you would give to people? Because I think when you start talking emotional intelligence, I even say the word emotional, and I know people get freaked out. And I think that's just society. As a society, we just think leaders can't have emotions. And
Right.
so as soon as you bring up that word emotion at the workplace, it's like, oh, this is getting uncomfortable. Is he like,
Right.
why are we talking about your feelings? Like that's not. So what are things and strategies you would give leaders to like do an emotional intelligence check-in throughout like a situation, right? Like what are things that they can do or practices they can start or even resources where it's like, did I have my vision wrong? Was I not aligned with their vision when I gave this feedback? Or, did I miss something when this happened? Was I not
Yeah.
leading the way that I want to be as a leader? How are things that people can do for emotional check-ins, would you say?
Yeah. Well, even the questions that you just asked were great. And to me, all of those questions are housed in a state of being of curiosity. We start all of our trainings off with like, we write the word curiosity nice and big. We invite people to write that down. We talk about it. We say, hey, we want to invite you into a space of radical curiosity. Like, get curious about what you believe about yourself, what you believe
Mhm.
about others, what you believe about the world, how things work, how things should work, right? Like, just when you bring that state, you're more likely to find the resource, whether it's, okay, now what do I need to do? What do I need to ask? Like, who do I need to talk to? Right. And so, but more often than not, we're, and we usually have people, we help people show like open hand, closed hand. Like
Mhm.
closed fist is usually how we're going into situations because being right feels comfortable, right? Like you talked about comfort, comfort. There's probably some people listening who, when you talked about like being comfortable, are like, no, I love risk. I love,
Yeah.
there are different ways we that are sneaky about being avoiding being uncomfortable, which is, and one of my personal favorites is being right.
Yeah.
Right? Being right is a place of comfort. If I'm right about, well, this is how they're going to respond, so I'm not even going to ask, or this is what emotions don't have a place in the workplace. Okay. My response is always maybe. Like I'm not gonna give you a black and white because like we long as human beings for like tell me what it is,
Give me the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, hey, what if you were just open handed, curious about where you might be wrong? Like one of like the easiest hacks you can do as a leader is go, I wonder what I might be wrong about that I'm not seeing. Because most of the time when we're wrong, we don't know it. It feels like being right. So where might I be wrong? How can I be curious about what I feel so right about right now? Um, yeah, that's my thing on, you know, there's lots of stuff out there on emotional intelligence. For people that are hesitant, I don't actually even I understand the hesitancy because I think any good thing can be abused, you know? So, like, even empathy, which is a good thing, can be abused, right? So, um, I never like to be black and white about all that stuff. And that's where, to me, vision is the guiding light. For someone who's like, well, I don't know about that. Like, what do I need to do? What should I do? Get rid of the need to, get rid of the have to, get rid of the should. What's your vision? Like, what's your vision just for results, but what's your vision for the experience you're committed to create for the people that you're surrounded by?
Yeah.
And then let that guide your steps, because again, like, when we're vision is more powerful than shoulds. And like, well, I guess I should ask this person how their day is. Like, like, what's your vision? How do you want people to feel? And let that guide you.
Yeah. No, I think that's I love that vision idea because I think it kind of puts everything in perspective. No
Yeah.
pun intended.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know we're kind of getting close to our block. This is the fun part of our podcast, and I just love kind of nerding out about this because there's just like anything in the world right now, it's always evolving. So there's no right or wrong answer to this. This is just your take on it. 10 years from now, we'll come back and like, was Janet right on this? And we'll, if you
I
were,
love
what
it.
would you?
I love it.
So how do you see leadership evolving? With AI
Mm,
now, next generation coming in, right? They have different motivations. Like, what's your take on like
yeah.
one is how is leadership going to evolve, and how are leaders going to have to evolve in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I think this line has been thrown around a lot lately when it comes to AI and where we're going. Um, I don't think it's AI that's going to take our jobs. I think it's people who choose to use AI, right? Like, you guys have probably heard that. Um, and so even I'm excited because I find that it will eliminate just the little things that take up our time.
Mhm.
For those of us who are executive coaches and we love working with leaders, we love people. It's a people game. So
Mhm.
to me, I am very curious to see how far it will go. I do think that people will long more and more for connection, to be
Yeah.
seen, to be heard, and that is what leadership is. So, and we can use AI to, like, track everything and do all the admin for us.
Mhm.
But ultimately, people will always long for connection, which is why leadership is so important from my perspective.
I love that. And so, with that, what would be like one piece of advice you would give to, I say aspiring leader, but I just say leaders in general. Like, what's one piece of
Yeah.
advice you would give as like kind of like your closing piece of advice for someone?
Yeah. Let's see. What would I like to land on with that? I wrote this down when I looked at your questions yesterday. Um, well, it was under the what would I, if I could go back, what would I
Yeah.
tell my younger self? It was
Yeah.
I wrote down learn to love yourself. And again, just like some people might be like bringing the word love into the
Yeah.
workplace, that's weird. Um, but a large portion of the gaps that I see in leaders really boil down to I'm too afraid to see it, so I'm going to put every front that I can. And ultimately, I'm carrying around shame and I
Hmm.
don't know it. So if you can eliminate shame, the game gets so much easier, and it's easier to do all the things related to
Yeah.
leadership when you're willing to say, "Hey, I'm okay. Who I am is unchangeable. What I do is not connected to my identity."
I love
Yeah.
that. And so then what's one book that you've read recently, whether it's leadership or something that you would recommend our listeners? Like, this has like been
Well,
very,
I have to, and I don't even have to.
yeah,
I want to unapologetically
yeah,
plug our book because I really believe I'm so proud of it. I think it's that good. It's a wonderful compilation of all the things we already do with our clients, and
mhm,
to us that was really important because not everyone can afford to work with an executive coach, but to be able to give you a book with all of the
Yeah.
stuff that you could take is great. So our book is called Beyond High Performance. It's actually also the name of our podcast, so you can
Yeah.
look us up on Spotify, Apple. It's also called Beyond High Performance. And so you'll hear a little bit about the idea of meta performance, which is what we say is meta, not like metadata, but like to transform, to reinvent. It's like what's after high performance? If you're already good at what you do, if you're already winning, what's next? And so the book talks a lot about that. It has a combination of frameworks, tools, stories, anecdotes to do that. And then I'm always a fan. I like plugging. Let's see, Dare to Lead is Brene Brown's
Yeah.
leadership book. I really love that. For those of us who are like, I don't know how to incorporate vulnerability, like when is it too much? When is it not enough? Right? That's a great book.
She's
But yeah,
she's someone that I think I aspire towards. We actually saw her speak once, and she's a great.
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
everyone's a great speaker. So
She's incredible.
so then the last thing, as we kind of wind away, I want to thank you again for your time. I appreciate you
Yeah.
jumping on here, and a lot of what we've been talking about with our members is about this leadership, and it's I think the one common thing we've had in this quarter, talking to leaders, and even now hearing from yourself, it's never the journey's never over, and be okay with that, right? Like we're
Hmm.
always going to evolve, and just be comfortable with being uncomfortable, like and know that like if you aspire to be a good leader, then there's always going to be growth. And
Yeah.
I always like to end my podcast with, because I think we as a society, I know leadership can sometimes be a thankless job. I think having been in that position, sometimes even I forget to thank my leaders, but also just want to thank you for what you do, right? Helping
Mm.
coach leaders, because those leaders go and help build companies, they help build better communities, and
Yeah.
in turn, right? Like I think we have good leadership around us, we all will be elevated. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
I'm hoping people thank
Yeah.
you, but if not, this is me thanking you today for what you do, and
I
helping leaders
received that.
become
Thank you.
leaders. So,
I
one
love
again,
that.
we
Thank
appreciate
you.
having you on, and like I said when we started, I think we could probably talk for another 2 hours, because
Oh yeah.
this is something that I think both of us are very passionate about, and then hopefully, both of us in Kansas City, we'll see each other around, and you're always
Yep.
welcome to be on our podcast. We'd love to have
Yep.
you, and I will share with the members how they can get in touch with you if you're open to it. If people want,
Yes.
to reach out to you to get some executive coaching or learn a
Yes,
little bit more
please.
about stuff you've talked about, I'll share your email, and hopefully people reach out and become
Please
better
do.
leaders.
Please do. Yeah, thank you. It's just so great to be here. I love what you guys are up to. I'm so excited to hear everything that y'all create together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Janet.
Yeah, you're so welcome.